Britain didn't build herself. She looted an empire and called it success. So there is a common sort of retort, particularly on the right within Britain, that we, the people of Britain, as they like to say, built this country and blah blah blah, and all of these bloody immigrants and descendants of bloody immigrants are essentially leeches and so on and so forth, parasites that contributed absolutely nothing to this nation, this great nation, and blah 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 blah. So it's a very self-serving mythology. The truth is far more nuanced. In addition to the fact that Britain maintained an enormous empire and that Britain itself is imperial by design, which is one of the reasons I personally believe in the fragmentation of Britain. I'm pro-English, I'm anti-British, if that makes sense. Um, in addition to this enormous empire that created, or rather was a theft when it came to the wealth and resources of others, we must remember that the primary target for the British Empire was not territorial expansion, it was markets. One thing that is often cited as the great sort of British achievement was the Industrial Revolution. The Industrial Revolution was not a self-driven process. For example, in the book The Indian Princes and Their States by Barbara N. Ramusuk, the princely states, various wealthy elite Indians that had sided with the British Empire essentially against their own traditional rivals, more or less provided the capital for the Industrial Revolution and more or less gained a, I guess you could say, foothold within Wales and funded locally. They invested locally. There are manors within Wales today in which they remember Rami, whatever the hell the name is of the person, and so on and so forth. And so their imprint is very much there to this day. Fun fact, the place that the Scientology leader L. Ron Hubbard situated himself at, St. Hill Manor, was owned by one such elite Indian individual. And so the Indian princely states played an enormous role in the British Empire. So much so that one could argue that they were a driving factor, if not responsible for the Industrial Revolution, something they were incredibly supportive of, so that where they could then use the empire's resources in their war against their own local traditional rivals back in India. So these are the subtleties and nuances of empire that oftentimes we have empires, but empires become dependent upon local allies. And who exactly gets the most out of this trade, if you will, is not entirely clear. And that many times local allies will often do things that are of great benefit to the empire, not because they're loyal to the empire, but because it benefits them in doing so. The British Industrial Revolution stands in stark contrast to the Japanese Industrial Revolution. When Japan industrialized, this was an entirely self-driven effort. According to the book The Japanese Empire, The Grand Strategy, from the Meiji Restoration to the Pacific War by S.C.M. Payne, the Japanese themselves were driven to industrialize the nation. This was an entirely local effort, and they did so because of a rivalry they had with Korea and China. Both Korea and China were also wanting to industrialize and build their own empires and so on and so forth. And so, in that rivalry between the three of them, Japan sought to become the dominant one. So there is basis for Japanese people to say, we built this country, when you think about it, because they quite literally did. The Japanese Imperial Empire didn't benefit them, in fact cost them dearly. This is not the case for Britain and the British Empire. And so we need to start having a mature understanding of human history and how real history works and real material conditions, and putting things into a global and historical context rather than buying into self-serving, patriotic mythology that makes one feel good because it gives an easy scapegoat to one's problems. That is the point. The far right within Britain want you to believe that the country is being overtaken by these evil parasites and so on and so forth. And I'm not saying that there aren't bad immigrants, there are certainly bad locals, of course. You know, different crimes that have been highlighted by the far right, those are awful and those are real. But there also are crimes done by the native population as well. The point is that we shouldn't centralize human beings. We should historicize human beings, because that is going to be the most accurate reading going forward. And so again, this mythology, Britain is self-built and all this, it's total nonsense. Other nations, whether they be from New Zealand, Australia, Britain, Canada, not Britain, sorry, Australia, South Africa, Canada, New Zealand, literally sent soldiers to defend your country, Britain, and die in your wars. Not only that, but following the Second World War, Mike Myers, the famous actor, is a prime example of this, agreed to take in entire families from your nation who were in effect refugees, gave them housing, schooling, and so on and so forth, funded entirely by the taxpayer. Many of them became lifelong dependents upon the welfare systems that they were walking into. And so do not tell me that Britain is self-made. Britain, if anything, is the parasite that the right and the UK talk about.